All right. So, Potato 5, thank you for your patience. A very good evening once again to each one of you. Thank you so much for being here. It's wonderful to have each one of you take out this time to be here on this Saturday evening. As always, it's an absolute pleasure to have you. Who all do we have here? I'd love to be able to say hi. Hi, Anand. Hi, Blossom. Hi, Chitra. Hi, Aruba. Hi, Garima. Hi, Jody. Hi, Karishma. Hi, Kuljit. Hi, Lisa. Hi Neha, hi Pallavi, hi Pavitra, hi Payal, hi Priyanka, hi Purnima, hi Swati,
Hello, Gata.
hi Vilma. All right, fantastic. So forgive me if I missed anyone, but thank you so much for being here. It's something that I'm super excited about because any work that we do, anything that we ultimately do in terms of healing, in terms of resolving issues, it culminates either as an outcome or as a process for ourselves in forgiveness, right? So everything I can look at all the sessions that I've done, all the work that I've done for myself, worked with others. At the end of the day, the outcome really is, the goal really is to be in that state of forgiveness, to be able to get to that space, even at times when we don't want to, even at times when we don't think we need to. Ultimately, it leads to that experience of forgiveness. And that's why it's so important. And all the things that we've been doing till now, we've worked on self worth, we've worked on self trust. In general, self love is about being able to forgive, whether it is outwards or whether it is inwards. Now, all of us understand or have heard of forgiveness to an extent. We know roughly what forgiveness is. We've been given a basic understanding of forgiveness. However, as I continue to work with individuals, as I continue to work with myself in terms of that understanding, what I've realized is that we have a very superficial understanding of forgiveness because we're not taught what it really is at the deeper level, at a deeper level of understanding, and what are the various nuances. So we have this broad level idea of what forgiveness really is, what it means to us, how it is something that we need to experience. So each one of us believe at some level, they say, yes, I need to be able to forgive. But we find it quite hard to do most of the time, right? As I work with clients, I find that that's something that they don't want to. It's something that they know at some level someone has told them. I have so many clients walk in and say, well, you know what, I'm ready to do this work, but don't you dare ask me to forgive because that's not something I'm ready to do, right? And it's a very common experience, and I was pleasantly surprised as I started to see this more and more that unwillingness to forgive. And so it really started to make me wonder what is the reason we don't want to forgive, let alone self forgiveness. That's maybe still a bit more complex, which we'll talk about in terms of understanding do we really need to forgive ourselves. But just forgiveness in general is something that we have a tendency to resist. So I started to look at what is the reason that, we have this tendency to resist forgiveness. Now, a lot of it is rooted in our understanding of what forgiveness really is, the way we're taught forgiveness. A lot of the times, the way forgiveness is taught to us, there's limited information that's given to us. There's a limited understanding that is given to us. So today, in the masterclass, the idea is to explore forgiveness, right? Each one of you, if you had taken out the time, you would have done the self forgiveness navigation that we'd done last week. There may have been elements that came up for you. There maybe have been aspects of yourself that came up and said, well, those are the parts of me that I have to forgive, right? And the thing about this is that consciously we aren't aware of this. We aren't aware that how is it that I have to forgive myself? I would assume that it's a default. It's built in. I should constantly forgive myself, right? And it's something that we tend to believe about forgiveness, that ourselves we forgive all the time. Even outside, we tend to look at forgiveness from a very different perspective than what it really is. So before we start today, and again, this entire process is introspective in nature. I want you to think, what do you understand about forgiveness? What does forgiveness really mean to you? Have you gone through a process of forgiveness? Have you ever forgiven someone else? Have you forgiven yourself? If so, What does that really mean to you? What does that signify for you? I just want you to take just a minute, not more than that, to really think, what is forgiveness for you? So that you know where your understanding comes from, what you understand about it. And then we start to talk about it so that you understand, okay, what are those nuances that I was maybe missing in my own experience, in the experience with others, right? So I'm going to give you a minute right now to just think about, what do you know? What do you understand? How do you define forgiveness for yourself? Take a moment. If you want to jot down a few notes, you can do that. I hope each one of you has something to write down the concepts that we'll cover over the next 45 minutes to an hour. Think about it just for a moment, and then we'll start to look at what it really is. All right. So if you had to think through, if you've thought about it, maybe again it may come to you at the surface level in terms of how you understand forgiveness, right? It's a very integral part of any work that we do relating to our past, because you cannot forgive for the future. Any forgiveness is always related conceptually to the past. So when we talk about how the past shapes us, how the past experiences are who we are today, the sum total of all of that is what leads to who I am today, what my behavior is. All of those experiences working together at the subconscious and the conscious level are what my outcome in terms of behavior is today. We start to realize that in all of those parts, we've experienced emotions, we've experienced or developed beliefs, and we've had fragmentation, right? And I'll explain that in a little more detail. But fragmentation is basically where little parts of us, whether positive or negative, not important, but at the subconscious level, little parts of us are creating, are staying in that moment. That's why our mind goes back to memories. It gets triggered to go back to experiences, right? Because there are parts of us sitting there. We call them the inner child, you can call them fragments, you can call them whatever, you can call them shadows, it doesn't matter. But there are these parts of us sitting there. Now, if they are sitting there and they've experienced emotions, which we all have, when you start to realize how integral forgiveness is to letting go, you start to realize how important it is that you and those parts of you have worked with forgiveness consistently, right? So as you've written down what is forgiveness for yourself, I want to ask you, have you applied that to all the experiences in your past? Small ones, big ones, impactful ones, less impactful ones. Do you feel that you've been able to apply that? It's something that we tend to forget. No one teaches us this. No one tells us this, right? In fact, when you look at it, we are told, well, you need to forgive and move on. No one tells us how. No one tells us why. No one tells us what the impact will be, right? So let's start to look at what is forgiveness, what it is not, but we tend to believe it is, right? And that's something, while you may have written down or thought about what you think forgiveness is right now, the nuances of the belief systems around forgiveness is something that you will be able to check for yourself. How do you see forgiveness? Do you understand it? And do you have underlying limiting beliefs around forgiveness itself? Right? So let's start off with that. What we're going to cover is what is forgiveness, what it is, what it isn't. We're also going to talk about what are the basic barriers to forgiveness, why sometimes forgiveness doesn't work. What is the reason behind why forgiveness doesn't work? A lot of us feel that, well, I forgive that individual or I have forgiven that incident. What is the reason I still feel all of this? Right? We'll start to understand what is that phenomenon, what is happening that forgiveness doesn't seem to work for you in those moments. And of course, then we'll focus on self-forgiveness. What is that? What is the concept? What is the reason we need to look at self-forgiveness? What is the reason it's not in our conscious awareness, but still very strong at the subconscious level, right? So super excited to take you through this. If you have any questions, please, you can type them out in the chat, or you can take them up in the forgiveness workshop that we're going to do, the mini workshop at the end of the month, probably the last week of this month, right? Okay, so let me now move to my whiteboard so that I can talk you through some of these concepts so that we can start to understand some of these concepts. Again, looking at the umbrella in terms of the work that we've been doing. So we looked at the various elements of self-love. There's self-care, there's self-esteem and self-worth, which we've worked on. There's self-trust, which we've worked on. Self-acceptance, there's self-forgiveness, which we are now working on this month. There's respect, value, and priority. And of course, there's compassion and kindness. And what you'll start to notice is that forgiveness is required in all these elements. Self-care. When I don't really take care of myself, I put rubbish into my body. I don't do what is required to keep my physical body where it needs to be, to keep my mental health where it needs to be. I need to be able to forgive myself. Self-esteem and self-worth. I've had moments when I don't feel up to the mark. I don't feel good enough. I don't value that worth that I have, that intrinsic worth that we talked about. Now, when you look at those moments of your life, have you forgiven them? Have you forgiven what caused it, what affected it? Have you forgiven yourself for allowing it to happen, right? Trust, very important, because we will make mistakes. We're human, right? And we are going to make mistakes or look at our past in terms of mistakes. They may not necessarily be mistakes, but we have a tendency to look at it. Have we forgiven ourselves for those mistakes? Because if I don't forgive that part of me, building trust within myself becomes complex, becomes difficult, becomes tedious for me. Acceptance. We all have those shadows. When I say those shadows, those parts of us that we reject, moments where we reject ourselves. Have I forgiven myself for rejecting a part of me? The part of me that was, I don't know, fact, not what the world wanted me to be, was not smart enough in that moment. Whatever those are, I rejected that part of me. Have I forgiven that action of me rejecting that part of me? Right? Of course, forgiveness itself, by virtue of the experiences, you will constantly generate emotions in everything that happens. People will take actions that may upset you, that may hurt you. There's no stopping that. It will happen. The question is how quickly you get to forgiveness so that you don't let it affect you. Moments where you didn't respect and value yourself, when you didn't prioritize yourself. Have you forgiven those parts of you? Have you forgiven the circumstances that caused you not to be able to do this? And of course, compassion and kindness, your self-talk. When you say something negative to yourself, when you reprimand yourself, when you punish yourself, are you able to catch yourself and forgive that in the moment? And that's why you start to see that forgiveness applies to everything. It's such an integral part of the letting go process. It's such an integral part of being able to create self-love for ourselves. So now let's start to look at what is forgiveness. Let's start to look at, by definition, what it really means. Forgiveness is the practice. It is the practice of letting go of suffering caused by someone else's actions or the actions that we take for ourselves. Right? Very simply put, and there are lots of other definitions around forgiveness, around letting go of the feeling of revenge or letting go of whatever experience it is. But in general, it is letting go of the suffering, the negative emotions or the perceived negative emotions that are caused by the actions of others and the actions that we take ourselves. In essence, it is that process, it is that practice that we need to bring in to our being. So that is what forgiveness really is by definition. But when we start to look at the details of it, when we start to get into the actual nuances of forgiveness, there are certain things that it is, and there are certain things that it is not. Yet we tend to get them muddled up. We tend to believe some of the things that it is not. We tend to believe that to be true. And I have so many individuals who will tell me that, well, Rajat, what's the point of forgiveness? It's not going to help me. What's the point of forgiveness? I'm just allowing it to happen again. What's the point of forgiving something when I feel so much upset and anger? So let's start to look at what is forgiveness not? What is it not? And what corollary to this, what is it actually? So the first thing that we need to understand about forgiveness is that it is not letting what happened affect you. And the most important thing, right? What happened, not letting it affect you. What is it not? So when we look at forgiveness, it basically means whatever has happened in my past, when I forgive it, it means that I am not letting it affect me in this moment. It is not creating an impact on my behavior today. It does not bring forward anger, upset, resentment, because it is not affecting me in this moment. In general, that's what forgiveness is. What is it not? It is not condoning or forgetting what happened. And this is one of the most important myths that a lot of us believe, that if I forgive, what I'm really saying is that it's okay what that person did, that I condone that what they did is something that they are allowed to do, that I am choosing to try and forget that. No, it's not about that. Forgiveness is not condoning, it is not saying that it was okay. Forgiveness has nothing to do with that at all. But a lot of us believe that. We say, well, if I forgive, then that person is going to repeat again. It's going to happen again. And it makes it seem as if I'm okay. That's not what forgiveness means. But we tend to believe this. But that's not what forgiveness is. Right. The next thing, what is it not? It is not the suppression of emotions to the degree where we are in denial of what happened. And this happens, again, something that happens quite a lot. We tend to believe that time heals everything. And so, as long as we continue to suppress and we continue to suppress it, it will go away. And so, we keep it hidden, we stay in denial about how we felt about it. And so, those suppressed emotions go deeper and deeper within us. We think now it's gone. That's why we are not consciously aware of it, because we've suppressed it deep within our subconscious. It's there, sitting there, waiting for the right trigger, for the right moment for it to come up. But we tend to believe that just because time has passed, that means I must have forgiven. That's not true. It's an active process. So it is definitely not suppressing your emotion. A lot of us believe that. Yes, I look at it now. Oh, it doesn't bother me. It doesn't affect me. And when I ask the individual, well, okay, so tell me about that incident or tell me about that moment, there is so much charge, so much emotion that comes up. If there is charge and emotion that comes up over an experience, it is not being forgiven. Because the essence of forgiveness is not letting what happened affect you. But in that moment, if you're going there and your emotions are coming up, that means it is. So suppressing the emotion to the state sometimes of denial is definitely not what forgiveness is. And a lot of us say, well, I've forgiven that. Right? Have you really? Because if you don't look at it, and it's not my responsibility, I don't want you to bring it up and it cause issues for you. But have you really, in the self healing process, have you really looked at it and said, no, I have expressed what I needed to express. Which brings us to what it really is. It is recognizing and expressing the emotion. As with everything, we have to first recognize what we felt. We have to first understand, we have to first accept that it is there, I did feel this, and then move towards expressing it to be able to move towards forgiveness. So when we say, have you forgiven something? If there hasn't been expression around what you experienced, it's a very high chance that there is no forgiveness. Or even if that forgiveness is there, it is fleeting and will break whenever a trigger happens in our life, right? So you have to recognize and express the emotion for you to move towards forgiveness. But a lot of the times we believe that as long as I have suppressed it deep enough, it doesn't affect me. And that's not true. The next thing, what it isn't, is forgiveness is not based on the intention that I expect others to change. That once I forgive, others will change. It's not for the others. But we tend to believe that once I choose to forgive, then the others should change. No, the others are not going to change unless they choose to. You cannot create that. That's something that you cannot force. So a lot of the times we say, well, I forgave them, yet they are exactly the way that they are, right? And that's a common understanding again that we have, that when I forgive, if I choose to forgive, the other person is going to change, they're not. And if that's a belief system that you have, that's an understanding that you have about forgiveness, that is not how forgiveness necessarily works. So that expectation that others will change because I have forgiven them is not what forgiveness is. What is it? It's the letting go. Because I understand that not forgiving hurts me. That belief, that understanding that because I don't forgive or I haven't forgiven, it is hurting me intrinsically in some way or form. It is affecting me. So letting go with a clear understanding that it is beneficial to me, not to anyone else, not because I am the bigger person, but because it is actually genuinely beneficial to me. And there's a lot of this, again, this understanding, I'm better than the other person because I chose to forgive them. No, you didn't do it for them. You did it for you. Which brings us the most related to all of this, the most important part, that it's for you. With me, it's for you, not for others. And a lot of times we're messaged, we're told that, well, you need to forgive them. You need to forgive them, of course, for yourself, but mostly because you need to forgive them. You're being difficult. You need to let it go for them. It's not for others. It is for you, for your own benefit. Can you start to look at forgiveness like that? And as I'm listing these out, it seems simple, but we have a lot of resistance to these things. I don't believe forgiveness is for me. I believe that forgiveness is that something that I have been told that is altruistic in nature, that I need to do, and it makes me the bigger person. It doesn't. It's for you. It makes you feel better about yourself. It makes you let go of whatever may be hurting or harming you. Another common understanding around forgiveness is that people who forgive, or if I forgive, it is viewed as a weakness. It is viewed as helpless acceptance. that only people who cannot do anything about what is happening are the individuals who forgive. And so, because I have no other option, so I have to forgive because I have to accept it from a space of helplessness. Again, this is not what forgiveness is. If you are coming from a space of weakness, a space of helpless acceptance, you cannot forgive. In fact, forgiveness is about building yourself up and taking charge. So, big forgiveness is actually you taking charge of your own life, you taking charge of the situation, because the situation has happened. There is that emotion, that experience that is sitting there. It is you taking charge of your experiences, taking responsibility of your experiences. The next one, accepting and allowing that pattern of behavior. Again, something that I mentioned, this belief that if I forgive, what I'm doing is I'm accepting that pattern of behavior. I'm empowering the other person to continue to do it. Again, forgiveness is not about empowering another person or validating what they are doing. Your forgiveness will allow you to learn what you need to change and create the boundaries to protect yourself. That's what true forgiveness is. It gives you that learning, that understanding, and it allows you to take the action to set the boundaries. If you have not been able to learn and set the boundaries, your forgiveness is not complete. Because yes, you may have let go of all this, but until you learn and set the boundaries, you are not forgiving the pattern itself. You're not changing the pattern itself. And so forgiveness is not about accepting and allowing what someone else did. It's not about letting them repeat that pattern. It is about you learning and setting the boundaries so that it doesn't happen to you again, so that that pattern does not repeat. What it is not, it is definitely not compulsory. And as a therapist, when I work with individuals, yes, like I said at the very beginning of this class, clients will say, well, don't ask me to forgive. And I don't. I don't ask them to forgive. I don't tell them you have to forgive. I ask them whether they want to make that choice. I ask them whether they feel that that's something that they want to do, because it has to come from choice. It has to come from my choice of letting it go. And when you start to understand all these top points, the choice is easy. But when we don't understand these things, when we don't believe that each of these things is what I will experience through forgiveness, this is what it will allow me to be. It will not affect me in the current moment. It will allow me to recognize and express the emotion which is sitting there. It will allow me to let go and understand that this entire process is beneficial to me. It is for me, not for others. It allows me to take charge, to be in charge, and accept the situation and resolve it. And it allows me to constantly learn and set the right boundaries. When I know all of this, is when I will by default choose to do this. And you may still not choose to do it, and that's your call, it's your life. But know the consequences of not choosing forgiveness. Know that all of this is what you may feel or may experience because you are not choosing forgiveness. It is not compulsory. You don't have to do it. You have to choose to do it. No one can force you into doing it, right? And when you start to look at what forgiveness is not, really look at these things. Do you believe these things? Do you come across individuals who believe these things? That it makes you feel weak, or it shows you in a weaker light? That it it creates that feeling that I'm allowing the other person to continue to repeat the pattern, that it is forced on you. What is the reason? All My clients say this, don't tell me to forgive, because they've already been told 1,000 times, you need to forgive, you need to forgive, you need to forgive. How? They don't know. And so for them, logically, it just doesn't make sense. They're not able to, because they don't understand these aspects. They don't know how to. They're still functioning from this space. Because when we look at forgiveness and what is taught to us, as I talked about the condition, why we find it hard is because we're given just a piece of the puzzle. We're told we need to forgive. What we're not taught is that I cannot forgive without expression and acceptance. What we're not taught is that until I identify and recognize those emotions, I cannot move to forgiveness. And this is very common, which is that we create this nice little, I would say, false or temporary wrapping around our experience. We have this box of experiences, right? Maybe negative experiences, maybe traumatic experiences. I have this box. Now put a nice forgiveness layer on top of it. What happens? Every time there's a trigger, this experience bursts through that wrapping paper and my forgiveness is lost. It's gone because all these emotions have come out. And that's why we find it so hard, because we do it from a space of covering things with forgiveness, not resolving and then choosing. Right? So these are the elements, these are the nuances. I want you to check when you were thinking about forgiveness. Maybe all of these things were coming into play for you. Now look at, are these beliefs somewhere there? Are there some limitations in how you view forgiveness for yourself and for the people around you? Are you choosing to identify what is right or wrong rather than choosing to be in forgiveness or choosing to be free or happy? Right? That's how you need to start to look at what is the reason. Because in your healing process, if there is a limitation, it normally comes down to how you view forgiveness and whether you're able to do it, whether you're able to do it completely. Right? So look at these specific things. Identify for yourself. Are there any of these that you believe about forgiveness? To take a moment, I want each one of you to just take a moment and see which one of these are there with you. When you think about forgiving yourself, do you feel that I don't need to forgive myself? Do you feel that, oh, I haven't changed from that time, so I can't forgive myself? Do you feel that I'm condoning my behavior by forgiving myself? I'm telling myself that if I forgive myself, then I will continue to do this. Because it's not about that as long as you're learning and creating the boundaries. And these boundaries are not only for others, it's for yourself as well. The boundaries, the acceptable behavior that you want to define for yourself. So look through it. I'm going to give you a minute, think about it, write it down for yourself. Which are your limitations in terms of moving towards forgiveness? And then we'll talk about the other barriers which are related to this. But what are the other barriers that you may be functioning from, or individuals function from, and which stop them from being able to go to forgiveness? All right. So if you've been able to think for yourself, identify that, great. Know that you can start to change it to this understanding. Anywhere you feel, my forgiveness makes me weak. Realize that it actually puts you in charge of your own life. My forgiveness is for others. No, it's not, it's for you. My forgiveness will create change in others. It won't. It will only allow you to understand that it is beneficial to you. And it will allow you to set the boundaries, which will change the way you experience life. And those boundaries will stop the other people's actions from affecting you. So it doesn't affect you. All right. And now let's look at what are the barriers to forgiveness. What are the specific barriers that we're experiencing through forgiveness? So one is victim mode. That experience that you had, that you maybe haven't chosen to forgive, is a part of your story. You have let that experience become so big that it defines who you are. And by forgiving it, there is actually a fear that you will not know who you are. Okay, I'm not saying everyone has this, but these are possible barriers. Whether you work with others, whether you're working on yourself, start to look at it. Is the individual defined by the experience of not forgiving? By holding on to that experience, by constantly experiencing that over and over again, they're keeping themselves in the victim mode, but it is also allowing them to justify their current experience in life. It is allowing them to act from a space of helpless acceptance. And it's a very thin line. It's very difficult to manage. But I want you to notice, have you been in victim mode about any specific thing? It doesn't have to be deep trauma, doesn't have to be big. Are you a victim of the story you tell yourself? Because a lot of the times we fail to forgive that part of us and that experience and that situation because it is actually helping me define and rationalize who I am and what my behavior is. Start to look at it. Have you been ever, or are you in victim mode with anything that you are experiencing? The next one is, of course, the ego and fear. It's rooted in the fear, the ego, that part of me that says, I'm not going to forgive. I don't need to forgive. They first need to apologize. And we've created this association. We only forgive when there is an apology. They're actually not linked. An apology has nothing to do with your forgiveness. An apology does not lead to your choice of forgiving what happened. But we have created that association that there has to be an apology for me to forgive. There has because their action is theirs. And you can keep waiting till they apologize. Even if they apologize, you can keep waiting for the perfect apology. You may get that apology and you say, well, that wasn't good enough. There's never going to be a time where it's going to be good enough, where it's going to be complete, because the incompletion lies within us because of the unexpressed or the suppressed emotion. When you deal with that, there is no need for an apology. We're able to move into forgiveness, but our conscious level association is so strong that we cannot allow one to happen without the other. A lot of us are able to move past it, absolutely. But in general, that is one very common barrier to forgiveness. Everyone I work with at some level says, well, where is my apology? It's not required. If you so choose to forgive because it benefits you, it has nothing to do with whether the other person apologized or not. And that's key, because otherwise we have created our own healing dependent on the action of others. And when we create that hook, that association, that dependency, we are again not in charge because it is dependent on what they do, how they do it, when they do it. So take back that part of you and ask yourself, do I need an apology? Do I really need for them to understand what they did was wrong, was right, whatever it was? Or do I need to deal with what I felt and learn what I need to learn and set the boundary? And maybe even forgive myself for letting it happen. Yes, there are situations where they were completely out of your control. You couldn't have changed them. But most things that bother us on a day-to-day basis are things that we could have changed, we could have done differently. And so, are you learning and you have boundaries? If you have that, you don't need the apology and the ego goes away. The fear that I will look weak, the fear that other people will continue to do it will go away because there is learning and there are boundaries that are being set. Look at it in terms of completion. As you've forgiven, have you really learned and set boundaries? Have you broken that understanding, that pattern, that formed in those moments? Which brings us to the third part. Again, like I referenced, that feeling of weakness. It is very common in our conditioning. We are told that, you know, forgive and move on. The way it's messaged to us is from a space of weakness. So just to give you an example, I was working with a client. The marriage wasn't working well. It was abusive in nature. And so this lady spoke to her parents, spoke to her, the people in her family, and their recommendation to her was to forgive and continue with the marriage. So what happened was the association that gets created is I have to forgive, but I still have to continue to deal with it. And so that association was that when I forgive, I'm essentially telling that person that I cannot do anything else. So I'm accepting it because I am continuing the same. And that is not forgiveness. But a lot of us have been told this, even in the smallest of situations. Oh, your brother did this to you? Well, forgive it and move on. But nothing changes in that transaction. And so we tend to download forgiveness as something where nothing changes. It is just a state of helpless acceptance, which it is not. Right? So know the difference. Know that very clearly. You are not being asked to accept helplessness. You're being asked to learn, to set boundaries, to make the choice, to be in charge. That's what forgiveness is. And so next time when someone says, well, you need to forgive this, go to this, not that feeling of weakness, if that's something that you feel. Okay? These are the core barriers, are the core aspects that stop us from being able to forgive. That stop us. Of course, because the suppressed emotion, which acts in each of these elements, and once we start to work with that, forgiveness becomes easier. Which brings me now to looking at why forgiveness doesn't seem to work. I addressed it before, but I'm just going to show this to you. I'm going to rub this out now. let's let's start to look at why forgiveness doesn't work. This is not something new. All of you at some level know this, but we need to understand it. When someone tells you you need to forgive, we automatically go to that understanding. This is me in my experience. We automatically go to that understanding that I have all these emotions about what happened sitting with me. There's anger, there's upset, there's regret, resentment, whatever it is. We are told to cover this with forgiveness. Don't sit around talking about it. Don't express it. Cover it with forgiveness. Like I said, a wrapping paper. And most people, most individuals, when they're doing this self work, end up being here because this works really fast. It's really easy. I don't have to go and visit all of this nonsense, this really negative emotion. I don't have to go there. I just put in positivity at the top level, and I create this framework around it of forgiveness. As life starts to happen, there are more and more impacts, more and more triggers. This starts to fade away. This starts to break, and this starts to come out again. Look at it for yourself. If you don't clear this out, this forgiveness will not stay. But if you clear this out, you actually clear out all of this and then create a firm layer of forgiveness around that understanding that I am now in charge. I have learned, I have transformed, I have changed something, I have let go. It's very hard for any outside force to break what you built for yourself. This is that path to true forgiveness. When I clear this out, and I create that safe structure, if you're functioning from this space, it can be very difficult. So this is why a lot of the times forgiveness doesn't seem to work for us. So many people say, "Oh, Rachit, I've already worked on this. Why does it keep coming up? I've already done that. I did this navigation and I put the positive light and I put it in, put the white light in and it all went away." Well, when the white light comes in or whatever it is that you are healing comes in, yes, positivity will come in. It will make you feel good in that moment. It will. And it will last for a while. But when triggers happen, it won't be there anymore because all that upset is still there. Facing it, and clearing it out, and then creating forgiveness. Which is why I said forgiveness is the consequence, it is the outcome of the deep level work that you do. It is the outcome of expressing that emotion. This happens by default. So that's why I never push anyone that you have to forgive. I will always ask them whether they want to make that choice, and they can make that choice after they have cleared this out. Because I know that the subconscious works and creates this forgiveness as long as all of this emotion is clear. Right? So only in moments when you don't clear out that deep part of you is when forgiveness doesn't work. Otherwise, forgiveness is a de facto, it's a default outcome of the healing process if it's done right. All right. Also, forgiveness is an important part of the entire letting go process. Again, I've been saying all of this, but when you really look at the letting go process, I've talked about this before in one of the master classes. The letting go process starts with expression of the emotion, letting all of that out. It moves to acceptance. Acceptance of what? Essentially, acceptance of all of those things that we talked about that forgiveness is. Acceptance that when I express, I'm able to move forward. Acceptance that whatever happened was in the past, it doesn't have to affect me. Acceptance that I have to learn something from it. And it was there for a reason, for me to take away what I needed to take away, to set the right boundaries, to change the patterns in my life. And when you come into that acceptance, forgiveness is much easier to reach. It's much easier to get to. And when you constantly experience forgiveness, you're able to truly be in gratitude. What happens? The reason forgiveness doesn't work, we don't go here, we don't go here. We try and directly do this. Try directly, I will take out my gratitude journal and start to express about what I'm grateful for. Yes, that's great. But these emotions are still sitting there. And so when we try and go here directly without doing this, it doesn't create that long lasting impact. And so forgiveness is an integral part of the entire letting go process. As you saw, anything in the past at some level needs forgiveness. And now that we understand all of this, let's talk about self forgiveness. So, how do we look at self forgiveness? Well, how do we identify that I have to forgive myself? The very basic thing that you will ask yourself is the emotion that you feel will reflect whether there is forgiveness required. And a lot of times, as I'm doing sessions, as I'm working with students, I will ask them if they have specific emotions that they experience. And the specific emotions that come up are lack of self trust, resentments, regrets, lack of self acceptance, lack of self respect, and most importantly, guilt. And I ask them, so how do you resolve guilt? What do you do to resolve guilt? Now, I am feeling guilty. No one else is. It's with me. And I'm holding guilt. How do you resolve it? There's absolutely no other way to resolve guilt other than self-forgiveness. So being able to forgive yourself is the only way to let go of guilt and to quite an extent to let go of all these other emotions of regret, of resentment, lack of self-trust. And that's why I said it ties into everything. Because when I start to work on my self-forgiveness constantly, I start to allow myself to be human, to make mistakes, and to learn from those mistakes. That's why they're there. For me to be able to learn from it, so I don't repeat that pattern. The pattern is not only from how you're experiencing the world outside, but from within as well. And so guilt can only be resolved through self-forgiveness. Other aspects, resentment, regret, all of these emotions will require an element of being able to forgive yourself. So if you look back at your story, if you look back at your life, you start to find these parts of yourself, that more part of yourself that you didn't respect, parts of yourself that you didn't trust. You're going to start to understand that there is a dynamic around it. There is a dynamic of a lack of self-forgiveness. So in this moment, I want you to take just 2 minutes. And you've done this before. We've gone to resentment and regret as we've looked at self-trust, as we've looked at self-worth. Look at it again. Are those parts of you truly forgiven? Have you gone through that process of expressing everything that needed to be expressed? Have you allowed that part of you now to take charge? Has that part of you forgiven you? Look at that dynamic. So take a moment, I'll give you a minute to just see. Do you hold guilt? Do you hold resentment? Do you hold regret? Do you hold any lack of trust and belief in yourself? What are the moments it comes from? Because it's possible that there is a part of you. I'm just going to explain that dynamic as well. That needs forgiveness, or that part of you needs to forgive you. So take a moment to do that. It doesn't have to be big things. Even the smallest of things that you hold guilt for, smallest of things that you regret, that mistake that you made, maybe you should have picked another field in your career. You've not gone through that relationship, not allowed what happened in that relationship, not disregarded what your intuition told you and gone the other way, even the smallest of moments. So those moments can create those fragmented parts. So hopefully you've been able to reflect and introspect on that. Now let's look at the dynamic that I talked about. So what is that dynamic in terms of trust? So look at this. This is the current you sitting here now in this moment. Let's say, just for example's sake, there is a 20-year-old you. 20-year-old you knew from within that there was a particular field of work that they wanted to go into. But they didn't make that choice because of peer pressure, because of family pressure, because it just didn't seem right, whatever that was. They knew within them. There was the subconscious voice was telling them, but they still didn't follow through on it. The dynamic could be that this current you sitting there possibly maybe not happy with the work that you do, possibly maybe not accepting of what is happening in your life, what you're getting from it, needs to forgive this younger you for making that decision and not listening to that younger part of you. Maybe there's a 15-year-old who, in those moments, started to go down a bad path. Maybe got into alcohol or drugs or did something that was not acceptable. And maybe you rejected this part of you and you don't want to look at this part of you now. Because those were possible mistakes that were made. This younger part of you could be holding resentment towards you for leaving them in that space, almost as if they are not a part of you. And now this part of you may need to forgive the current you for leaving them there, which is the other dynamic. And of course, the third, maybe there's a 5-year-old. Again, all of these are just examples for you to start to really look at your own life. There's a 5-year-old part where both of you need to be able to forgive each other. Maybe that 5-year-old part went through an experience that was not appropriate. Maybe there was something that was not appropriate, and they didn't feel safe and secure. And you never helped them let that go. Even the current you left them there in that space. And the current you feels that this younger you put themselves in danger to be exposed to that moment, or that this younger you strained the relationship you had with your family. And so that dynamic of forgiveness between the two still needs to be resolved. Right? The idea for looking at this is we need to understand that forgiveness can be two ways in terms of the fragments. That fragment would also need to forgive me. And a lot of times our ego doesn't let us see that, but it's very possible. And when we do the deep work, when we work at the subconscious level, it happens both ways. Both these dynamics, as well as the third one, are at play. So really look at it for yourself. Again, just starting to understand and identify for yourself which dynamic is there, which part of you is feeling what. So you really get in touch with yourself, you'll start to understand. And you'll start to make an impact. You'll start to be able to let go and forgive those parts of you. And that's something that we will be doing next week as part of the navigation and as part of the mini workshop, to be able to forgive these parts, bring them back, make ourselves whole and complete. And one more thing now, as we look at how to build forgiveness in our daily routine, there's a very simple thing. It's a concept taken from Ho'oponopono. Those of you who don't know, you can always have a look at what that is. But it's a prayer. It's a mantra. It's an affirmation that you tell yourself. And I use this in almost all my sessions. And it's very, very powerful. When you start to come from humility and you start to say to yourself, so at the end of the day, let's say you had a long day, you had a lot of interactions with a lot of people. Some were good, some weren't great, some were created some suppressed emotions. Just thinking about those individuals as you close your eyes at the end of the day, before you go to sleep, if you were to just in the moment repeat what I'm just going to tell you will find that you're able to let go of the suppressed emotion just using forgiveness, just allowing yourself to forgive in that moment. And as you do it, build it into your daily routine every day. You don't build up things that need to be forgiven 5 years from now and have built up and you've ruminated about and thought about too much if you just do this on a daily. So, what are those words that I use that are very useful? Again, it's not mine, it comes from the Ho'oponopono. We've made some tweaks to it. It goes, I'm sorry. Please forgive me. I forgive you. Any experience that you had, you're imagining, you're visualizing that experience, and you're telling it, I'm sorry, please forgive me, even if you didn't do anything wrong. This is key. That's why you have to be in humility, not from an ego space. Please forgive me, even if you didn't. Maybe you did, maybe you didn't even realize it. How many times does it happen that we get hurt by someone and they don't even realize it? So by being in this space of if I did, please forgive me. I'm okay to ask for forgiveness. There's nothing wrong with that. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. I forgive you. I love, respect, and honor you. I'm sorry, please forgive me. I forgive you. I love, respect, and honor you. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to heal. Bless you. If you truly want to start to build forgiveness into your life, I want you to write this down. I'm going to read it out in case you can't see it or my handwriting does not allow you to understand it. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. I forgive you. I love, respect, and honor you. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to heal. Bless you. Every time I find that someone's wronged me, something upset me, I've done something wrong, I'm feeling guilty, I do this. And it is so powerful. It is so powerful. I continue to repeat it. As I repeat it, I just go to that state where it doesn't affect me anymore. Start to build this in. If you're not doing something like this already, start to build this in. This in itself on a daily basis. And you can do this thinking about those younger parts of you. You can do this thinking about other people whom you need to truly let go of. Remember, it's a choice. And when you start to do that, I'm sorry, please forgive me. I forgive you. I love, respect, and honor you. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to heal. Bless you. You will start to get into that state of forgiveness almost instantly. All right. Okay, so hopefully everyone's been able to write that down, make it a part of you. Like I said, it's not mine. It's part of the Ho'oponopono prayer. In a way, it's slightly tweaked. We use it at HSI constantly as well, and it's a very, very powerful tool. So that was our masterclass on forgiveness, folks. I know I've gone 5 minutes over time, lots to cover, but I hope you've been able to start to really look at the nuances, understand forgiveness, be able to communicate forgiveness, because I truly believe that each one of you is going to make an impact. As you heal, you will teach your children, you will teach your spouses, you will teach people around you, you will teach, if you're going to be a therapist, you will teach clients. And all of these things are so important. Yes, you may not have the time, but if you understand these concepts, if you really truly imbibe them in your life, you will make such a huge impact. You will make being able to forgive and being able to experience forgiveness easier for the world. I think that's huge, the impact that you can create with this. That being said, thank you very, very much for your time on this Saturday evening. It's been wonderful. Thank you for joining in. And I look forward to seeing you next week. We're doing a navigation on resolving some of these parts of us. We're on letting go and forgiving those parts of us. And of course, we have the mini workshop where we get to interact more at a one-to-one level, really work through it, do some deep navigations as we start to heal each aspect of ourselves. Hopefully, you've been able to look at all the work that you've been doing. You're starting to feel that self-love, that aspect of yourself growing, your self-worth growing, that self-trust growing. Evaluate. If not, ask yourself what is stopping you. Do what you need to do to get there. All right. So have a fantastic Saturday evening. Have a great Sunday ahead. See you next week. Thank you very much. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much, Rachit.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rachit. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Rachit. Thank you. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you and good night, Rachit. Thank you so
Good
much.
night. Thank you.